xt6 passenger side CV axle replacement. These right here are 19 millimeters. We'll do that to start out. If you have hubcaps, you can just stick a screwdriver in this slot and pry it out. With your wheel off, we'll start from disconnecting it here. If I remember correctly, you don't need to take the strut apart, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. I'm going to be replacing these brakes, so I'm going to take all this stuff off. Take your cotter pin and your safety nut off. Axle nut is 32 millimeters. I have a gun, so I should be able to break this loose. If you guys don't have that, it might be advisable to take that stuff off and with the wheel on the ground, just get that breaker bar and just go for it. Luckily, I was able to get that with the gun. Started pounding just slightly just to see, and it does want to come right out. So, from here, we need to get some stuff loose. If I remember correctly, you can turn the wheel to the right so that it's angled in like that, and you should be able to pop it out. I'm going to try that first before I go too crazy with taking this strut assembly apart and taking all this stuff off. Okay, so turning it wasn't quite enough. Down in there, there's a cotter pin, or a roll pin actually, that holds it on. You can kind of see it there. You need to hammer that out. It's kind of a pain, but luckily we can do it. I will get a punch and show you guys what I do for that. So I'm accessing this roll pin from underneath the vehicle. You guys can see it right there if this camera will focus. I used a pick to scrape away some of this dirt and debris. Make sure when you park this vehicle, if you're going to do this job, this roll pin is easily accessible either from underneath or above or wherever you are deciding to hammer it from, so you have a nice lineup with a punch in the hammer. Alrighty, so here we are. Got that roll pin hammered out. Luckily it was pretty easy. It took me less than 30 seconds. I've struggled with roll pin extraction on this same job before. You can get a pair of pliers down there and pull the rest of that out. My punch, I was at an angle, so my punch didn't want to go all the way through without binding. Quick tip to get the rest of the roll pin out, if you don't want to sit there with the hammer and punch, use your dikes, bite into that roll pin, and then you can pry it up off that inner joint right there on that ridge. So there's a tip. Okay, so unfortunately we're gonna have to take the knuckle off the strut. Luckily it's not too bad on these. Both 19 millimeters. There's some proof for you. I'm gonna get in here. Luckily I can zap this with the gun. Actually, that one's smaller. That one's probably a 17 for the bottom for some reason. 19 on the top. Pretty sure that's gonna be a 17, maybe an 18. Okay, once you remove your strut mounting, you can pull it off of that shaft on the transmission. From there, you can throw it to the left and then pound this bad boy out. There's a washer here. So once you pull the shaft out, throw it to the left, then you can start hammering away on here. You'll run into a clearance issue where that joint will hit the strut. What you do for that is, once it's out of the transmission, you push down really hard on this, because those bushings bring it all cattywampus since it's not mounted anymore. Push it down, slide a bolt through just so it's held in place. Then you can play with the shaft, hammer it in, and it'll pop out. This is my new shaft. I got this from O'Reilly's. Let me see if I can find a part number for you guys. Maybe I will do some research on that. See if I can find this. This was a special order. I did have to pay for shipping. But as you can see, this is correct. Our spline count is the same for both. It comes with a new roll pin. We might use the old one just because it's broken already. Might not. We'll see how it fits. I know in the past I've had issues with the new roll pins being like way too big and I need to crunch them down. It's just a pain. So I know technically you probably shouldn't reuse an old roll pin, but whatever. Now the tricky part with this is aligning the splines in there with the hole for the roll pin. I've messed that up a couple times, but luckily there's a pretty easy method for it that I will show you guys. You're going to want to put this end in first. I'll kind of show you guys how I get it in there. But you will be attaching this end first, and then you can spin this and line up the splines and retry if you mess it up. This is your guys' part number for the shaft. Now to get this in here, this is what you're going to want to do. You're going to want to get your transmission end, thread it up underneath the tie rod, underneath that hose, or that cable actually, like so. Then you can feed it up in there. Once you get to this point, you're going to want to bring the whole shaft up, like so. Then you can angle this into here, into the hub. One note to add is get yourself some grease from a grease gun and grease up. You don't need a whole lot, just a little bit on the splines of the transmission as well as on the shaft going into the hub. You don't need a lot, probably just a, maybe like a dime size, just smear it all around the splines. You can also use this video if you need to access in there to replace that transmission seal on that bit right there. Luckily this one isn't leaking, so I don't need to do that. Anyways, I got grease on the splines. I got this in here. I didn't have any clearance issues with this bolt in here. Now I'm going to show you guys how to get it attached to the transmission. Get yourself a light. We need to be able to see where that hole is down there. This might be tricky to get on film. Maybe through here. Here we go. You're going to push it in, and then you can spin from the hub your CV shaft. From there, we need to get it lined up. This is the trickiest part of this job. Plus, maybe getting the shaft out with that roll pin can be kind of tough. We need to go a little bit more. This could be it right here. But you got to shove that shaft through. Like so. It's kind of tricky to get on there. We need to go back a little bit. See how my holes aren't lined up? This O2 sensor wire is in the way. But you guys get the idea. Just keep spinning until you get your holes lined up. Okay, here we go. Got this on. I'm going to stick this camera down here. You guys can see that hole is lined up in there. You can double check with a pick or with another tool, but make sure that you're not off by a spline. I've done that, and it's frustrating. Also, you don't need to remove your bolt for getting it back on. If you just push in on the axle, you can get it to go on that shaft. So, luckily, before I started hammering away, I double checked. Thought I was lined up, but I wasn't. I was off by one spline. From underneath, you can see even better. To pull your shaft off, adjust it, and then you can get that roll pin in. One way to check that you're aligned is if you can get your punch in there. If you can fit your punch in there and get it through there, you know you're lined up. So that's one way to check. The reason these axles fail, especially the passenger side, look at this catalytic converter right here. That's hot exhaust. It's really close to that rubber boot. So that accelerates the wear on these tremendously. The driver's side doesn't go out as much because it's not as close to the exhaust. The driver's side's much easier of a job to do because there's not this cat in the way. So it is advisable that you perhaps add some heat blankets or something to this cat to help keep the heat away from that boot. Like I said, it accelerates the wear tremendously. Then it starts leaking grease on your cat, which can lead to smoking. That's what this one was doing. So there's some more information there on why these fail so much and possibly how to fix it. Get some exhaust wrap this cat up. Or, you know, if you're a good fabricator or something, you could possibly even just remove it. I don't condone that's federally illegal, but it is an option. Or reroute the exhaust somehow to get it away from that boot. Anyways, I will now proceed with getting that roll pin in. Also, if you can, another thing too, like you can see, if it will focus, you can see light through there, so you know that you're aligned. I'll proceed with getting the roll pin punched in and reassembly, show you guys how to put that strut back on the knuckle. One quick note, I had my e-brake on. I wasn't able to turn this as efficiently, but what you can do is when you get to the roll pin part, spin your axle, flip that hole up. There's a little wire holder right here. Undo the wires that are in there, give yourself some room, pull your wires out of the way. Then you can easily start your roll pin by hammering it in. Then from there, you can flip it 180 degrees, get that roll pin on the bottom, and then hammer it up from the bottom. So it's much easier, you have more room to work, and you're not possibly damaging any wires while trying to hammer it. I did that once. I destroyed the O2 sensor wire on my other XT because I wasn't thinking and I had damaged it. So anyways, there's a little tip there. Wanted to show you guys how easy this access is right here. Just right underneath, I was able to get my punch, brace up against the cat right there, and then just hammer it in from underneath. You could also do this to remove the pin. Luckily, I was able to do it from this side. I didn't realize my e-brake was on, and I couldn't turn my my hub, so that was my fault. I wasn't really paying attention. But that's how to get that pin in. Now we'll proceed back to the hub. Whoops. The CV shaft I got came with a new nut. It did not come with a cotter pin or a washer, so we'll be reusing the cotter pin as well as this washer that was on here. Just put that on. Supposedly these OEM axles are rebuildable. I will be hanging on to this one and likely attaching new boots to it. Hopefully I didn't mushroom out the threads. It doesn't look like it. That's another tip. If you're going to save your axle and possibly rebuild it, throw your nut on there so you don't destroy the threads. Theoretically, you could use a thread file and fix it. I'm not too worried about it. This axle is covered under warranty, so when it goes out, I'll just exchange it for a new one. Or I will rebuild that one and have it on hand for when it needs to be replaced. I find it's easier to attach the bottom bolt first, because then it lines everything up. You can see how we're all cattywampus. I don't think I have enough strength to push down on these bushings, but you can push it in, hammer it down, whatever you got to do to align these bolt holes really quick while you stuff one bolt in. Then you can mess with it, align it more, get the top bolt in. 17 millimeter on the bottom, 19 millimeter on the top. Got our bolts in. Start with your top, wiggle it, get it popped in there. Then you can, not a big fan of it, but you can drive it in. I didn't mess up the threads at all, so don't worry about that. Then you can mess with it, align your bottom bolt, pound it, the rest of it through with a hammer. Throw our nuts back on. I'm not sure the torque specs for these. I just think the gun is good enough. Same thing with this axle nut. I'm just going to zap that with the gun. I'm sure you can find the torque specs online. It's probably similar to like a GL or DL wagon or one of those other Subarus. I think they're the same part anyway. Anyways, I'll get back to you guys once all this stuff's installed. One thing to note, they upgraded the size of this nut. The problem with that is the socket that I have for this nut won't fit because it hits the outer piece of this hub. So hopefully this other nut will fit. I will confirm that in a second. So get this one off. Yes, you can reuse this old nut. I recommend that unless you have a socket that fits. My socket wouldn't work on there, it kept hitting the hub, so we're going to reuse this old nut. I went crazy with the gun on that nut, got it super duper tight at max torque settings. Unfortunately, we have to reuse this grody looking cotter pin, if it'll even go in there. I will also be covering the brakes in this video. I am not changing the rotors. These ones are kind of crusty. I might have them turned. I don't know if the machine shop is open to turn them, but I'll just be doing a pad slap. I will show you guys that and provide a part number for that as well. I will skip to that part now after I end this clip and get this cotter pin in. I've got everything reassembled. We'll now proceed with the brake caliper. I need to turn the steering wheel. I'm going to turn it all the way to the left to give us plenty of access on this caliper. This caliper pin bolt is a 14. Make sure you have your e-brake off, or else this might be a pain when you go to compress your caliper. Once you remove that bolt, take your hammer and your punch, pound that caliper off. You will need one of these tools. I will show it on camera in a second. These pads are pretty shot. Fortunately, you can't open the clamshell up too much. We may just end up tying it up somewhere up here with some wire so it's not dangling. Look at how bad these pads are, man. That's sad. Neglected this car. Luckily, the rotors aren't completely trashed. It's actually well, actually, it doesn't look that good on camera. These are turnable. If you're going to take the whole caliper off, do your rotors. Phillips screw there, holding it to the hub. Behind here, you have two bolts. I will check the size in a second. Those look like 17s. Those are, in fact, 17mm bolts. So there's two of those. Obviously, you would just remove those. Yes, can confirm that is a 17. But yes, you'd just remove those two bolts, take your caliper off, and then proceed from there with your rotors. I'm not doing rotors. I think these will be good enough once these pads bed in, so not too worried about it. This tool is used to compress the caliper. This is available at many major auto parts stores. I got mine in Advance. But you'll see here that it goes in there. And then you put a ratchet on there, and you can screw this caliper piston in. This is a tool we'll be using as several different sizes. I think the one for this vehicle is probably this one right here, since it fits in those grooves there. Yep, that fits pretty good right there. So that's probably the pattern we're going to use. It's this semicircle looking one. This isn't advisable, but I just used a screw gun to zap that in. I was really struggling trying to hold it still and mess with it. Not sure how advisable that is. I didn't mar up the caliper too bad, except for right here, which isn't a critical point. So anyways, to remove these pads, just get something and pry these out. These ones look like they could be rusted in there pretty good. Unfortunately, I did not get new hardware included in my brake kit. We will now check these pads and ensure they are the same. They look good. Those should work. Get you guys a part number for these. I believe that is it right there. If not that, then that. I will double check that in just a moment. The way these pads go on is they need to be opposites, like that. See that clip or that warning indicator? They go on the bottom. So this one will go like that. And now on the inside, this one will go like that. Here's Brake Best. This is from O'Reilly's. That should be your part number right there. I think so. Yes. I was able to get it to the point in which I can get the caliper back on over the pads, like so. Need to push the slide pin out. We're hung up on something. Can't exactly tell. Might just need some of the old English. Not sure what we're hitting. There, actually. Anyways, I will get it figured out, but that's your brake procedure. I figured it out without hammering. When you screw your caliper piston back in, See that little nub right there? Make sure that that is where that nub is. See on the old pad, or one of these old pads, where's the other pad? Here it is. You can see this wear mark. This is how I found this out. See that piston? See that indent where that tool fits in to screw it in? That nub needs to go on there. Now we are fully reassembled. We are ready to put this wheel back on. I'll be doing the other side brakes as well. I believe I have brakes for the rear as well that I will be putting on at a later date. But that's your CV shaft procedure, as well as some information on your front brakes. Got the wheel back on. Make sure you guys put your wires back in that retaining piece right here so that they don't get beat up by this heat down here from that cat. If you guys like this content, or if this helps you, if you own an XT yourself, and you know how it is with these cars, it's tough to find parts, tough to find any information on. So the point of these videos is just to get information out there and give kind of a visual some of these procedures. So if you guys like this content, subscribe. There's going to be more coming soon on this car. We got a timing belt, serpentine belt, and some other stuff going on. So thank you guys for watching. Subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.